Hey everybody, Jackless Painting here with a new tutorial, and today I'm working on this really cool little Abrams tank. This is for Team Yankee or Tanks the Modern Age. Really cool little game, and we're going to be doing some tank painting in camo, starting off with some dark camo green from Pro Acryl. Just going to base coat the tank out using that. I do want to go ahead and say right out the gate that this is not going to be a historically accurate video. Team Yankee is a World War III fictional game, so I don't care if it's not the right shade of green from 1985 to 1987 or whatever most historical wargamers bitch about. Just going to highlight that up with some camo green, just the lighter version of dark camo green from Pro Acryl. Making sure to leave most of the details shaded with the airbrush there. We're going for a more realistic look with this model, so I'm not going to be using the same high contrast paint style you normally see me use on sci-fi models. Making sure our highlights are nice and subtle and thin. Next I'm going to use some scaly hide from Army Painter. This is just a pastel army green color, and I'm going to very lightly highlight on the top panels of the tank just to pop them a little bit. And the only reason I'm going this bright is because down the road we are going to be doing some very dark washes that is going to drab everything down a little bit. So for our green, I wanted to go slightly brighter than I wanted the end result to be. This highlight is important to keep really thin and semi-transparent. We almost want this to be a color filter rather than a full-on highlight. Next, I'm going to grab some light umber and we're going to start cutting in our camo pattern. I'm just using a very simple diagonal camo stripe pattern for this tank, using some greens, browns, and black colors. I just did a Warhammer tank in this same camo pattern and I really liked it, so I decided I would use it again for this guy, and it makes my tanks unique. You know, I could use the exact NATO camo pattern for the Abrams, it's on the box art, but I wanted my tanks to be mine, so I'm going with a unique kind of camo pattern for these guys. There's all sorts of ways to make camo patterns on your vehicles. This is just one way that I typically like because it's really easy to do with the airbrush. Just create some different angled stripes on the model, kind of break up those lines. You can do patches or splotches or some of that more blobby type camo. I'm not sure what the official term for it is, but I like the stripe stuff, so that's typically what I like to do. Next, I'm going to mix in some olive flesh to that light umber. Just pastel it out a little bit and lightly highlight over those brown lines, much in the same way that we just highlighted our greens with the scaly hide. Just a very thin highlight to sort of pastel out the lines in those camo patterns, because once I put on our washes and drab everything out, we'll get to the final result that I want rather than something darker than what I want. So always go a little bit brighter than you want and then wash it back down. For the border stripes, I'm going to use just black primer. I just put Stynylrez black primer back in the airbrush here and turn my air down to almost completely cut off. I was using my little inline dial on the hose to make it exceptionally soft because I wanted to work very close to the model to cut in these lines, because I didn't want any speckling or wide spray patterns. I wanted to be able to just go along the edges of these brown stripes and kind of clean them up a little bit and border them in with this black paint. Now that our camo pattern is cut in, I'm going to be grabbing a dry brush and some tan slash khaki color paint. It's a kind of neutral color that can highlight all of the colors of our camo, and just very, very lightly dry brushing along our details. Want to make sure that I'm not dry brushing too heavily because I want this effect to be fairly subtle after the wash. At this scale and for a more realistic looking tank, you don't want Tron neon edge highlights on your realistic main battle tank. So just take it slow, very lightly dry brush onto those details. If you want to do camouflage of different colors, this is a really good way to catch all the details on your vehicles. Just pick a color that can reasonably highlight all of the colors of your camo. Typically it's a more organic color like a khaki or a tan. With that done, I'm going to grab some dark silver and we're going to cut in all the stuff that I need to be metallic, starting off with our two mounted machine guns on the top of the turret, and then working our way around to the tracks. The other thing I'm going to do with this color is get most of the paint out of my brush and use it to create some slight paint chipping. So you're going to see me go around the road wheels and edges of the tank armor, just very lightly touching the tank with the edge of my brush on any hard edges of the hull of the tank, just to create a little bit of wear and tear and to help it look a little bit more realistic. If you're careful and take your time, doing slight paint chipping this way is a really easy way of highlighting edges on your models without actually having to keep a very steady hand and draw lines. In previous videos, I've gone over how doing some weathering and paint chipping is a way to create more detail on your models without necessarily having to have more skill in wielding the brush. I know that edge highlights in particular is a fairly difficult technique for a lot of people to learn, so I've been trying to include these little weathering steps in more of my videos. With all that painted, I'm going to move on to the wash using the Mr. Hobby oil wash system. First thing I'm going to do is coat the entire model in the liquid solvent, which is more of a diluter rather than a solvent. This is just going to break up the surface tension on the model, and when I put the black wash on there, it's going to pre-dilute it a little bit. And I'm just going to rub this all over the tank, letting it work its way into the details. And once I have covered the entire tank in the wash, I'm going to clean out my brush in the solvent and then come back and use more of that solvent to dilute the wash more and kind of break it up, help it move around and get into the details without staining on the flat portions of the model. And I also like to use my brush as sort of a eraser and blending tool, wicking away excess wash and kind of cleaning it up. So in particular on this tank, on the big top flat plates and on big plates like the side skirts and things like that, I'm going to load my brush up with some solvent and clean those off and wick away any diluted wash so that the details are shaded but the flat surfaces are nice and clean. Now that that wash is dry, I'm going to base coat in some deep green on these tarps that are on the back of the stowage racks. These are super easy to make. It's a really old scale modeling trick of just using a piece of paper towel and coating it in watered down PVA glue and just letting that set. Creates a hard plasticky surface that you can paint on, and it keeps that nice cloth texture. Personally, I like using blue shop towels. If you have those, it's really, really easy to do. So I recommend trying it on your next project. With all of our colors blocked in, I'm going to coat the model in some gloss varnish. I've been using this Lucky varnish from Ammo by MiG and really liking it because you can just drop it directly in your airbrush and spray. No need to thin it out. And I'm setting up the model with that gloss varnish to do some decals. I've got my micro set over here, which is a decal setter. And I've already applied some of the decals because it's kind of a time-consuming process, so I just wanted to show you guys what I do. I like to coat the back of the decal paper in a healthy amount of micro set. That's going to soak through and release the decal from the paper. And once it's ready to come off on its own, then I will put a very small amount of micro set onto the model and place the decal. When you apply your decals using the micro set, you want to make sure that it has plenty of time to fully dry. It does have some chemicals in it that do need to completely off-gas before you seal over the model with varnish, or else it creates sort of a frosty rind underneath that varnish, and it can ruin models. I'd like to say I've never done that, but I definitely have quite a few times because I'm impatient. So if you're doing this at home, make sure that you let your decal set chemical totally dry up and off-gas, and then seal your model with some varnish, which we are about to do in the next shot. Once your decals are dry, just make sure to seal the model with a varnish of choice. I really like this ultra matte varnish from Ammo by MiG. This Lucky brand varnish has been great. I really enjoy using it. And here's the final result. I think all told, it took me maybe 30 minutes to paint this tank totally. That's including with the washes and the decals. It's exactly what I was going for. I wanted to be able to have some great looking tanks with relatively low time investment if I want to get into this game. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I might do more of these tanks in the future, so if you like this video and you want to see more stuff from Team Yankee or Tanks the Modern Age, let me know in the comments. I'll see you next time.